I want you to picture a scenario. It's, let's say a Tuesday afternoon, incredibly high stakes, maybe a server farm just overheated, or a massive PR crisis just hit the news cycle.
Oh, yeah, the classic hair on fire moment.
Exactly. It's total chaos. Everyone is loud. You've got people screaming instructions, people looking for someone to blame so they don't get fired. Just a lot of noise and panic. But then you see this one person in the corner. They aren't yelling. They aren't even moving. They've gone completely silent.
And, for most people looking at that, it looks like they're checking out. It looks like they're just freezing up under the pressure.
Right, but they aren't frozen. They are locked in. They are mentally tearing the building down to the studs to find the one stress fracture that causes the collapse in the first place.
It's the calm in the storm, but it's not a passive calm. It is an intensely active, almost aggressive internal audit.
That specific energy, that quiet, intense rebuilding is what we are unpacking today. We're back with another deep dive into the Max Energy ME80 personality system, and today we are tackling the profile code WSAU. They call this one the Silent Inner Rebuilder.
This is a heavy hitter of a profile. And I don't mean heavy as in loud or oppressive. I mean heavy in terms of the burden they carry.
Yeah.
And the structural integrity they provide.
Yeah.
If you have a WSAU in your life, you know they aren't trying to be the star of the show. They just want the show to actually work.
So our mission today is to really decode what's actually happening inside that silence. We're basing this on the Silent Inner Rebuilder Assessment Report from Max Energy.
Right.
We need to figure out how they process the world, why they're so obsessed with mistakes, and why you call them the structural engineers of the human experience.
It's a fascinating psychology because it runs almost entirely counter to modern culture. I mean, we live in a broadcast culture, right?
Everyone wants to share their opinion immediately.
Exactly. But the WSAU is a reception and repair culture of one.
Okay, before we get into the gears of the WSAU, let's quickly level set on the system itself. For anyone new, we've talked about things like Myers-Briggs and Enneagrams before. How is the Max Energy ME80 system actually different?
The distinction is really right there in the name. Energy. Most systems look at traits like, are you nice, are you organized? ME80 looks at the flow.
Okay.
It's like a circuit board diagram for the brain. How do you take in data? How do you process the emotion attached to it? How do you calculate a decision? And finally, how do you manifest action?
So it's the operating system, not just the user interface.
Exactly. And every single profile has a completely unique rhythm to that flow.
Okay, let's look at the rhythm of the Silent Inner Rebuilder. The report has this hero section right at the top, basically a core declaration. What is the identity here?
The core declaration is, and I'll just quote it directly, quietly and steadfastly corrects the self, sealing fractures back into wholeness.
Sealing fractures. That phrasing is so specific. It almost sounds architectural.
Yeah.
Or maybe medical, like a surgeon stitching up a wound.
It's kind of both. The WSAU is what we call a contemplative personality. Their primary drive is self-calibration.
What does that look like?
Well, when things go wrong, their instinct isn't to look outward at the environment or blame the people around them. They look inward at the structure. They are entirely directed toward repair.
I have to be honest, that sounds exhausting. I mean, in a world where the default reaction is usually defensiveness, it wasn't me, the email instructions were unclear. The WSAU does the exact opposite.
The exact opposite. And this is where it really gets interesting. Confronted with an error or a directional drift, meaning a project or a relationship veering off course, they rarely rush to explain themselves.
Really?
Yeah, they don't try to win the argument.
So they just don't care about being right.
Oh, they definitely care about being right. But they define right differently. They don't care about rhetorical correctness.
Like having the best excuse or the wittiest comeback.
Right. They care about lasting proof.
What does that mean, lasting proof?
It means the only apology the WSAU actually believes in is ensuring the system never fails in that specific way again. They extract perspective from the emotion. They don't want to talk about the mistake.
They want to patch the code that allowed the mistake to happen.
Precisely. Which leads us directly to their control mechanism. The report outlines a very specific philosophy they operate under. First, correct judgment, then correct the world.
Wow. First correct judgment, then correct the world.
This is the absolute key to understanding them. A WSAU believes that if the external world is going wrong, it is highly likely because their internal judgment or assessment was slightly off.
That is a massive amount of responsibility to take on. Just saying, the project failed, so my judgment must have been flawed, not the vendor was late.
It can be a heavy burden. But for them, it's actually empowering. If the fault lies in their judgment, that means they have the power to fix it.
Oh, I see. If they blame the vendor, they're helpless.
Exactly. So they reclaim responsibility. They execute reflection, review, and reconstruction. They want lasting proof, remember.
Right. It's about control. If I blame myself, I can fix myself. If I blame you, I have to just wait around for you to change.
Exactly.
But practically speaking, how does this work in real time? I think we need to look at the energy matrix. The report breaks this down into 4 layers: IP, IQ, EQ, and manifestation. This is the technical engine under the hood. Walk us through this rhythm.
The rhythm for a silent inner rebuilder is defined as inward drawing, then verification, then repair, then restart.
It sounds exactly like a computer rebooting in safe mode.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Think of a high-end server. When it detects a bug, it doesn't explode. It draws power inward, runs a diagnostic, patches the code, and restarts.
Okay, let's go layer by layer because this is where the nuance really is. The first one is the IP layer, the inner value. What is the very first thing a WSAU does when new information hits them?
Their IP layer is risk perception activation.
Risk perception. So they aren't looking for opportunity, they're looking for danger.
First and foremost, yes. Their instinct is to immediately scan for structural weakness. They're asking, is this safe? Is this stable? Where is the crack in the foundation?
Give me an example of that in real life.
Sure. While an optimist might walk into a business meeting seeing potential deals and handshakes, the WSAU walks in seeing potential liabilities and contract loopholes.
Honestly, that sounds a bit like anxiety to me.
It can be anxiety if it's unregulated. But for a healthy WSAU, it's just data. It's a safety scan. They are the ones asking, what happens if this goes wrong? While everyone else is already popping champagne.
Okay, so they've scanned for risk. Now we move to the IQ layer, the emotional activation layer. This is where I get a little confused. We usually think of IQ as pure logic, but in this system, it's about how you process feelings.
Right. In the ME80 system, the IQ layer is about how you validate the energy coming in. For the WSAU, this is experience-driven verification judgment.
Experience-driven verification. Break that down for us.
When they feel an emotion, let's say a sudden pang of fear about a business decision, they don't just ride the wave of that emotion. They cross-reference it. It's a library check.
Like checking a precedent in law.
Exactly. They ask themselves, I feel anxious. Have I felt this before? What happened last time? Did the project fail? Or was I just hungry? They use intense logical verification to audit their own gut feelings.
So they don't blindly trust their gut. They subject their gut to a deposition.
They audit everything. If the feeling doesn't match a past verified pattern, they might just discard it. Or if it does match a past failure, they lock down. They're constantly comparing the now against the archive of their past experiences.
Okay, then we get to the EQ layer, the decision calculation. Once they've verified the risk and checked the library, how do they decide what to do?
This is emotional detachment and understanding.
Yeah.
And this is crucial. To fix the problem, they have to stop feeling the problem. They detach.
So they step back.
Right. They step back to see the structure of the issue completely objectively, without the noise of their own fear or anger.
It's like a surgeon scrubbing in. You can't be crying over the patient while you're operating. You have to be totally cold to be effective.
Precisely. It's a tactical detachment.
Right.
They aren't unfeeling. They are just putting their feelings in a box so they can see the blueprint clearly.
And finally, the manifestation layer. This is what we actually see, what comes out of the machine.
The output is precise structural patching. Their energy releases outward, not as a wave of charisma or a motivational speech or an explosion of anger. It releases as specific, targeted actions to fix the break.
Structural patching. So they aren't repainting the wall to make it look pretty. They are reinforcing the studs behind it.
They are the ones rewriting the standard operating procedure. They're the ones adding a double authentication step to the login. It's unsexy, it's quiet, and it saves the company.
Let's dig deeper into the internal traits. We mentioned self-calibration as their core trait earlier. I want to understand what that looks like in a relationship or a team dynamic.
It manifests as a distinct lack of finger-pointing. When a problem emerges, the WSAU prioritizes examining their own judgments first. They literally ask, did I view this wrong? Did I miss a variable?
It's like they treat life as a simulation they're programming. If the simulation glitches, they assume it's a syntax error in their own code.
Yes. They excel at deconstructing errors into structural factors. They use modeling to reestablish reliable decision logic.
So they want the system, whether that's a marriage or a business, To have greater stability after the repair than it did before.
They don't just want to get back to normal. They want to get to better than normal.
That sounds incredibly useful for an organization or a family, but I want to push back a bit, just playing devil's advocate. Is this healthy for them? Because it sounds like they take on 100% of the blame.
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the shadow blind spot of the WSAU. No personality type is a superhero without a kryptonite.
So what is it?
The report calls it accumulated internal pressure.
That sounds like a boiler about to burst.
It's the downside of that inward drawing rhythm we talked about. The dynamic here is a trade-off. They assume responsibility too quickly, but they process the resulting emotion too slowly.
Wait, unpack that. They say it's my fault immediately.
Internally, yes. They take the weight of the air instantly. But because they are so busy analyzing the structure and fixing the logic, they don't actually process the stress, the shame, or the frustration.
Oh.
They just pack it away in the basement.
So they are over-internalizing.
Exactly. Because they over-internalize, they trap pressure inside, they're carrying a heavy backpack that no one else can see. And because they present this calm, detached exterior.
Nobody knows to help them take it off.
Right.
Does this affect their performance? Or just their mental health?
It affects both. Specifically, it affects speed. The report notes that this repeated review process enhances precision, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it creates a massive lag.
Delay action timing.
Right. They might be stuck in the verification phase, trying to get the fix absolutely perfect, analyzing every possible risk. Meanwhile, the market has moved on. The opportunity is gone.
It's analysis paralysis, but specifically driven by self-criticism. Like, I can't launch this until I'm sure I won't make a mistake.
Yes. Compounded high standards become a very heavy, hidden psychological burden. They can become rigid, afraid to move because moving implies risk, and they haven't finished scanning yet.
That definitely bleeds into how they interact with other people. If I'm working with a WSAU or dating one, what am I experiencing? Because the report uses the term rational distance.
Rational distance is basically a polite way of saying emotional wall. To the outside world, they are the rock. They are known for being reliable, reasonable, steady. You rarely see a WSAU having a public meltdown.
Which makes people trust them. I mean, we like steady people.
We do, but they are difficult to approach. Because they maintain that distance to keep their objectivity, others struggle to gauge their true consumption.
True consumption. You mean I can't tell if they're totally fine or if they're dying inside?
Exactly. A WSAU could be on the brink of total burnout, but because their mechanism is detach and repair, they look exactly the same as they do on a normal Tuesday.
That creates a weird dynamic, trusted yet difficult to approach.
Right. You respect them, but you might hesitate to ask, hey, are you okay? Because they seem so entirely self-contained. It can be a very lonely place for the WSAU. They've built a fortress to protect the system, but sometimes they lock themselves inside the fortress.
Let's pivot to where this personality type really shines despite those challenges, the workplace. If I'm a CEO, why do I want a silent inner rebuilder on my payroll?
Their core advantage is structural repair and risk recalibration ability.
Okay, buzzwords aside, what does that mean for my bottom line?
It means they are the only ones who can truly stop a recurring problem. Most employees fix a mistake with duct tape. They smooth over the client, they hide the error, they move on. The WSAU converts singular errors into system upgrade opportunities.
System upgrade opportunities. I really like that framing.
A WSAU distills that bad experience into a new process. They build guardrails. If you have a WSAU on your team, you stop making the same mistake twice. They don't just put out the fire. They install a sprinkler system.
So they are basically the creators of institutional memory.
Without a doubt. They create the playbook that keeps the company safe. They enable the organization to move with more composure in the future because the foundation is fundamentally stronger.
Given that superpower, what careers should they be looking at? Where do they thrive?
The report is very specific here. Fields where precision and error correction are paramount. First, risk control and compliance systems.
Makes sense. You want someone who sees the cracks before the regulators do.
Exactly, because they excel at establishing irrefutable baseline logic. Also, process design and quality management. Anywhere you need to optimize standard operating procedures.
What about high-stakes fields?
Absolutely. The report explicitly mentions high safety and high responsibility industries. We're talking financial risk control, medical administration, precision engineering.
Fields where a decimal point in the wrong place literally destroys lives or fortunes.
Right. You want a WSAU watching the monitors in a nuclear plant. You want a WSAU checking the flight path. because they are the ones who will catch the drift before it becomes a complete disaster.
And finally, review mechanisms and institutional optimization.
Basically, the postmortem. The WSAU is the best person to lead the gains and losses analysis after a project. They won't make it personal. They won't say Steve messed up. They'll say the communication protocol between design and engineering failed at 2:80 p.m.
It's clear that while they might be silent, their impact is loud. But it's a delayed volume. You don't realize how good they were until they leave, and suddenly everything starts breaking.
That's the paradox. The silent inner rebuilder's contributions often proceed completely without fanfare. They don't need the applause. In fact, they often dislike it. But their impact is profound and enduring.
It makes you think about how we value people. We celebrate the visionaries, the loudspeakers, the people who break things to move fast. But we forget the people who make sure the stage doesn't collapse under them.
That brings us to a really important thought to leave with the learners. We live in an era obsessed with disruption, right? Move fast and break things. But there is a massive invisible value in pure stability.
So if you're listening to this and you recognize yourself, if you're the one scanning for cracks while everyone else is partying, what's the takeaway? Or if you work with one?
Value the quiet result. When a system becomes steadily more reliable, when error rates drop, when things just work and you don't even notice why, that is the invisible signature of a WSAU. Don't mistake their silence for disengagement. They are likely working harder than anyone else in the room.
I want to read the gold sentence from the conclusion of the report because it really sums this up perfectly. When systems become steadily more reliable through their successive calibrations and error rates decline continuously, that quiet yet stable outcome represents their genuine value.
Beautifully put. It's not about the flash. It's about the uptime.
This has been a fascinating look into the mind of the silent inner rebuilder. If you want to dive deeper into this personality type or find out your own profile, remember this analysis came from the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report.
Yes, and if you want to learn more about the entire system, you can visit the official website at www.maxenergylife.com.
You can also search for Max Energy or Met Energy on Facebook to find more on energy personality psychology. It's totally worth checking out just to see the different energy matrices. It really changes how you view your coworkers.
Absolutely. Understanding your energy matrix is the first step to mastering it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Go appreciate the structural engineers in your life today. Maybe buy them a coffee, but don't ask them how they're feeling unless you really mean it. We'll see you next time.